The latest national poll for the Democratic primary shows Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren pulling ahead of the pack. Biden still leads with 31% of the vote, Warren behind at 25%. Bernie Sanders is in third, 14%, while Kamala Harris has dropped from 13 back in June down to 5%. The poll also shows that Warren is rising among black voters and as the leader among Hispanic voters. Still, voters' minds are pretty fluid right now. Only 9% of Democratic primary voters say their mind is definitely made up on which candidate to support. I want to bring in Dave Weigel. He's a national political correspondent for the Washington Post. He's also the author of the Trailer newsletter, which covers the 2020 race and is celebrating its one-year anniversary today. Happy anniversary, Dave. I hope there's cake in the Washington Post newsroom.
Thank you very much. I guess this is the confetti was the one-year holiday or something. I'm trying to think what the political anniversary would be. Yeah.
That's right. Confetti. You absolutely right. You know, Dave, I want to ask you about this. You know, I try to avoid talking about national polls on the show, but there's some crosstabs sort of interested. We're interested on some of these issues here, particularly the race where Warren leads among white and Hispanic voters. She's the second among black voters as well, still behind Joe Biden. When you look at that big picture, what does that mean?
Well, I like your caveat at the beginning because not only
Yes.
is there not a national primary, but what a sample is about 500 people nationally. The crosstabs, the sub-questions for black and Hispanic voters, that's not a lot of people. We're talking about a few dozen Hispanic voters in this poll. What it does do is contravene some of what other campaigns were saying. The Sanders campaign has been emphasizing any poll where he's doing very well with non-white voters, with voters without college degrees, arguing that he can build a broader coalition than Warren can and that he's the stronger candidate of the left. They're not hyping this poll because this cuts against that. And with the rest of these metrics, Warren, whatever the margin of error is clearly able to appeal to some non-white voters in a way that a candidate like Pete Buttigieg is not, in a way that Bernie Sanders could not do really until pretty late in the primary last time. So the margins really do matter. If you're losing South Carolina's black voters by 80 points like Sanders did, you're out of the game. If you're losing them by 40, you actually have a path to nomination, not an easy one, but a path.
We know Biden is doing really well consistently with black voters. Where do you think he's failing, though, to expand his support?
Well, I think his actual campaign performances and rhetoric, he has not been gaining that much in the states, in the places where he has campaigned in person. His favorables with Democrats have not been going up. They've all been going down after the debates. I think it's entirely due to candidate performance. I mean, Warren has been a smoother performer. Sanders has mostly been a smooth performer. Klobuchar and Booker have. Biden has made some mistakes. So he is still holding on to electability voters, but slipping with some of that. And he's not been appealing to the higher educated white voters who were in love with Barack Obama, were warm to Joe Biden, especially when he was considering a run in 2016, but have found him to be just not a safe candidate, also just not an exciting candidate, and they can envision a world where the candidate who excites them, like Warren, is more electable.
You know, because it really is all about electability. You know, last go around in 2016, Bernie Sanders did well with young folks, and we're seeing he still continues to do well in that younger demographic. He's actually leading among voters under 35. On the flip side, you see Biden doing really well with people over 65. Warren is steady at 25 within those demographics. What's the takeaway when you look at age? And you mentioned particularly those likely voters who will come out to the polls and vote.
Yeah, well, that last group is very important because another thing you'll hear the Sanders campaign emphasize is that they are organizing people who do not normally vote in primaries, who might not vote at all, like the Trump campaign is doing, whereas the Warren campaign is doing better with people who vote in every primary, people who got active in 2018, which it was high turnout but less high than a normal presidential primary. They're doing better in the universe of Democrats who pay attention and always vote. And Biden and Sanders are doing a bit better with people who are not paying attention, who could tune in later. So it is important to watch that. We look at these dynamics, we look at one poll going up and down and wonder if somebody surged. What happens very close to now, in about a month or so, is voters who were told themselves, I am too busy to cover this race, are going to tune in. We're a little bit less clear if they're going to be disappointed by what they see from somebody, or they're going to be excited about what they see from someone like Warren. But Warren's campaign, and to an extent Biden's campaign, have always been iterative, building and building so that when people do tune in, they both look credible.
You know, meanwhile, what's going on with Senator Kamala Harris? Her support tanking. She had this strong showing after the first debate, and an Iowa caucus poll that was actually taken by her own chief pollster shows her failing. I mean, 6th place. Can she turn this around?
She could turn it around, but the problem I think Harris confronted, just from talking to voters and seeing how these polls moved and how the electability question moved, is she had one very commanding debate performance where no one laid a glove on her. She was eloquent, she was sharp. She attacked Joe Biden in a way that took him a couple days to recover from, and took her a couple days to explain. And so. Since then, she has not had the same commanding performance either in a big cattle call, in a debate. She has not been as easy to imagine for a lot of Democrats on the stage with Donald Trump dismantling him, or back and forth in the fray of the campaign, beating Donald Trump in a news cycle. And if that sounds a little frivolous, this is something that's really gotten into Democrats' heads since 2016, when they worry. You hear a lot of Democrats worry about just a debate where a female candidate is getting approached by Donald Trump and doesn't know how to respond to him. Harris seemed to have a very strong rebuttal to that with a strong debate performance, and since then has been a little stumbled, has backtracked a couple of policies, has generally not been as easy to imagine in that driver's seat debating and dismantling Donald Trump.
Before you go, I do want to ask you about another prominent Democrat, former President Jimmy Carter. He discussed his thoughts, looking sort of at age and the presidency. Here's what he had to say.
I hope there's an age limit. You know, if I were just 80 years old, if I was 15 years younger, I don't believe I could undertake the duties that I experienced when I was president.
What do you make of his comments, Dave?
Well, Carter voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016. He admitted that after the primaries. He was comfortable casting kind of a protest vote in that election. This is very hard to read as anything but a warning that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are less appealing to someone like him. How many votes does he move in a Democratic primary? That's not clear, but a lot of Democrats are very reluctant to criticize the age of Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, to bring that up because it backfires. I think Carter is channeling what a lot of Democrats, especially in his age cohort, think, that this might be a vulnerability that nobody's talking about in the general election. And
if somebody can talk about age and succeeding and doing well, it's certainly Jimmy Carter. Pay attention when he says something like that. Dave Weigel, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and happy anniversary to you.
Thank you very much.